An historic meeting has taken place. It's almost 60 years since an American and Cuban leader have sat down for talks. That was Eisenhower and Batista. After a warm handshake between Presidents Barack Obama and Raul Castro on Friday, a face-to-face meeting on Saturday on the sidelines of the Summit of the Americas. But what does all of this mean for US-Cuba relations? CCTV's Raul is at the White House. But first, we go to our Havana correspondent, who is at the summit in Panama City.
Susan, the prospect of the United States and Cuba restoring diplomatic relations is tantalizingly close, but not quite there yet. I think the fact that both US President Barack Obama and Cuba's Raul Castro attended the summit, sat around the same table, had their private meetings, has really added momentum to the process. There was no breakthrough. There's no date set, for example, for opening an embassy. But I think both sides are intent on putting the past behind them.
The 7th Summit of the Americas comes just 4 months after the United States and Cuba announced plans to restore diplomatic relations. It started with a cordial handshake as US President Barack Obama greeted his Cuban counterpart, President Raul Castro. Then came this historic meeting during a break in proceedings. It's the first time in more than 50 years that a US and Cuban leader have held face-to-face talks.
I think we are now in a position to move on a path towards the future and leave behind some of the circumstances of the past.
I think the fundamentals which the President expressed to you are the same as what we think.
Barack Obama wasn't born when Fidel Castro came to power in 1959 and formed an alliance with the Soviet Union at the height of the Cold War. But Washington's attempts to isolate Cuba by breaking off diplomatic relations and imposing a trade embargo has ended up isolating the US instead. By re-establishing diplomatic ties with Cuba, President Obama is also looking to rebuild relations across the continent.
This shift in US policy represents a turning point for our entire region. The fact that President Castro and I are both sitting here today marks a historic occasion. It is the first time in more than half a century that all the nations of the Americas are meeting to address our future together.
Raul Castro may not have the charisma of his elder brother Fidel, but his speech was impassioned and emotional, laying out Cuba's long history of grievances against the United States. But then he absolved Obama of responsibility for the past.
I ask his forgiveness because President Obama had nothing to do with any of this. In my opinion, President Obama is an honest man.
Despite the change of policy and attitude toward Cuba, several of the region's leaders used the summit to criticize President Obama and the United States.
Susan, there was speculation that President Obama might use the summit to announce that he was going to take Cuba off the list of state sponsors of terrorism. It didn't happen, but I think there is a growing feeling that the two sides are making progress towards restoring diplomatic ties.
Michael, it's quite a different scene than the last summit when the two were like an elephant in the room because the relations were so icy. Things are much better now. They are moving in a different direction. How are the other countries reacting to all of this?
Well, I think at one level, everybody here, all of the other, all 35 nations here were delighted. I think really there was a very positive mood that both presidents are here. There is, though, a bloc of left-wing countries, the Alpha bloc, the Alba bloc of Venezuela, Ecuador, Bolivia, for example, who really in their speeches were still highly critical of the United States and its policy. But this really was quite some summit. And Raul Castro's speech there, he started by saying most people have been told they can only have 8 minutes to speak. He said, I've missed the last 6 summits. I want to have time for all 6 of those. And then went on to speak for almost an hour, a bit like his elder brother Fidel used to do. and it was a very emotional speech. I think this has been, as I say, quite some summit.
Michael Voss, thank you for that, joining us live from Panama.